Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Entertainment Network. I am your host, Sarah. It is Tuesday and I'm happy to be with you once again. As we get started, I do want to remind you, as always, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you are either listening to or watching this episode on. That really does help the algorithm. If you want to help in another way, in a monetary fashion, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info and leave a tip or a donation. That not only helps this podcast, it helps the network as a whole. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.info. If you would like to leave a question or a comment when you leave your donation, I would be happy to engage with that question or a comment at the beginning of the episode following receiving said question or comment. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.info. Chalupa is down there. I can't. There we go. Anyway, you see my dog. I can't point in the right direction, but you see a little dog down there who is staring at nothing. I don't know what he's staring at, but dogs do that. He's saying also, please, gsmcpodcast.info. Staring at nothing. How is your day going? It is election day, which is crazy. It's here. It feels like we've been talking about this election forever. So we don't do politics on this podcast, but I will say, if you haven't voted, please go out and do so. It's nighttime here, but I'm many hours ahead of most of you in the US, so you still have time. But that's as far as I'm going to get with that. But it is election day in the US. So it's always something to keep an eye on and make sure we're keeping up with all of that. So how is your week going so far? How was your weekend? It is November already. Crazy. Did you have a good Thanksgiving? Our Thanksgiving was really, really rainy. I mentioned that there was a parade here. I don't know how that parade went. I haven't heard because it poured. It was just dumping buckets of rain, which we need. We desperately need the rain, but we did not go out into that rain. So I don't know how the parade was. I just stayed home and watched Halloween movies, and I think hubby went to bed early. That's about as exciting as we were. And then the weekend was quiet. Can't even think of anything that we did. I know we did something, but anyway, can't think of what we did, so let's not worry about it. Let's talk about a book instead. As I mentioned at the end of the last interview, or the last episode and interview, I have another returning author this week. Dr. Roger Leslie is joining me to talk about his book, No Stranger Christmas. This might be the shortest blurb on the planet. I looked on multiple sites and got the same blurb everywhere, but let me read it to you. While trying to save Christmas for his financially struggling family, 14-year-old Frankie Lincoln finds the courage to explore his artistry, stand up to gay discrimination, and pursue first love. It is one sentence. I can't absolutely guarantee that that's the shortest blurb we've had for a book, but it is up there. But yes, this is a Christmas book, which is great because we are, Halloween's over, and usually that means that Christmas music starts playing everywhere. But you might be thinking about books that you want to read for the Christmas season. If you're a seasonal reader like I am, I love books that are set around the holiday that we are approaching. So you may want to add this to your list. Maybe you have a young reader in your life. Frankie is 14. He is in 8th grade. And you got a very brief description about that, but Frankie is 14. This is historical fiction, not too far in the past, late 70s, I believe. I could be misquoting that. Late 70s, early 80s, but I think late 70s. And he discovers that his family's Christmas is not maybe going to be what it has been in the past, and he's very concerned about that, and he wants to try to help. He's also trying to help at his school. They do a live nativity. The 8th grade class does a live nativity at his Catholic school every year, and he decides that he wants to elevate that live nativity a little bit. He is interested in being a film writer, director, producer when he is older. And so he decides to write a script for the live nativity so that it can be narrated and be different. He's hoping for a couple things from this. One, because it's something that he finds of interest. And two, because he kind of wants to put himself out there a little bit more, maybe be seen a little bit differently in the eyes of his teachers and his peers. There's definitely elements of coming of age in this story. It is, if you're looking for a Christmas story, it is very sweet. It's got some great messages in it. Great messages about Christmas, great messages about family, relationships, great messages about figuring out, you know, we're all figuring out who we are at 14, right? And Frankie's no exception. And just trying to figure out, what do you do? How do you navigate the world? How do you reconcile who you are with who you see yourself and who you want to be and who others see you as, all of those questions. And there's some really good conversations throughout the book that deal with those exact topics. So let's go ahead and let Roger talk more about this book, since he did in fact write it. So he knows a thing or two about the story. Again, the book is called No Stranger Christmas. The author is Roger Leslie. Hi, Roger, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm great. I'm so grateful to be here, Sarah.
I'm happy to have you back, and I get to see your face this time, so that is nice.
It does make it easier.
It's one advantage of going video. I get to actually look at people while I'm talking to them instead of just audio. For people who maybe haven't heard the first interview, this is your second interview with the podcast, or don't remember you, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself as we get started, that would be great.
Sure. So I'm Roger Leslie. I'm an author, a publisher, an editor, and a writing coach. My passion has always been to be a writer. So I've been writing since I was about 13 years old. And I always tell my clients, persistence is the most important thing, because my first book didn't come out till I was 31. If I had known at age 13 that I wouldn't start meeting success for so many years, I might have been discouraged. But since I didn't know, I just kept going. And so No Stranger Christmas, the new Christmas novel that is just coming out, is my 20th book.
Wow. I didn't realize it was 20. So congratulations. I knew it was a good number, but that's a nice round number. I like that. Tell me what is going on. Like, if it says first last year in your background, what is that about?
So one of my books is called My First Last Year, and this occurred several years ago. I had a dream, and in the dream, I was told to live the next year of my life as if I would never experience those 365 days again. I was told to pack everything into my life and make sure that anything I wanted to do for myself, for my loved ones, and the legacy I left, I needed to do it in those next 365 days. I was also told to write about it as I was living it, and then to teach others about it. And so that My First Last Year was a book that came out back in 2015. And since then, I have intermittently been teaching first last year classes. And so this is my logo for my first last year class that I teach.
Right. I do remember you talking about that last time. So thank you.
Sure.
You already mentioned that the new book is called No Stranger Christmas. So can you give an overview of the story?
So the central character is Frankie Lincoln. He's a 14-year-old, and he's wise beyond his years, but emotionally, because of his home situation, he has some growing up to do. And the special challenge he meets this particular Christmas is that his family, although his parents don't share the details about it, they're struggling financially, and it looks like they won't have a Christmas at all. On the cusp of all this, he is in the 8th grade nativity at his Catholic school. And his dream is to be a director, actor, and writer. So he comes up with this plan that he's going to, instead of just doing a silent live nativity, that he wants to make it into a whole production. And his challenge then is to figure out how he can do that to prove to himself that he has what it takes to fulfill his dream. And in the meantime, see what he can do to try to save Christmas for his family.
Yeah. So yes, as we mentioned just a few moments ago, Frankie is trying to save Christmas for his family, and he is doing so in some really sweet ways. And then a couple, I'm not going to tell you what he does, because of course you should read the book, but in some very sweet ways. He's especially concerned about his younger brother, making sure that he has a Christmas, but also in some ways that made me kind of go, ooh, you maybe need to rethink that. Just, not maybe fully thinking through exactly his heart's in the right place, but He's 14. He's still working things out. We are going to take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking more about Frankie, some of the aspects of this book as the coming of age story that it is, etc. So you are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. Just a reminder as we get into this second segment of my conversation with author Roger Leslie, that if you want to support the podcast and the network as a whole in a monetary fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.info. There you can leave a tip or a donation. It is greatly appreciated. All of your support is always greatly appreciated, no matter what form that support takes. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.info. I am speaking, as I said, with Roger Leslie about his book, No Stranger Christmas. Before the break, Roger just gave the overview of the story, and we had a quick conversation, and now we're going to get back into that conversation about the book and Frankie and the story itself. And it's a very sweet story. There's some coming of age struggles. I mean, he is in 8th grade. I personally do not want to go back to 8th grade. Not sure about you, how you felt about it, but
it was a rough period.
Yeah.
If you may recall, the last book that we were here talking about was Light Come Out of the Closet. And that was my experience from 6th grade till I was about in 11th grade. So you already know it was a rough time for me, as it is for many children.
Yeah, actually, when I first started reading the book and was introduced to Frankie, there were parts of the story that really did remind me of parts of your memoir, just kind of some of those growing pains, experiences that Frankie is having. Can you talk a little bit about Frankie? What about him as the main character do you think will resonate with readers?
More than anything, Sarah, he's just a decent human being. He is wise beyond his years. He's extremely intelligent, but he has a lot of growing up to do because of his, emotional, unique situation. And so I resonate with characters that I think I can care about. And he's such a good-hearted person. And the struggle he has is less with other people than the internal struggle of coming to terms with who he is and figuring out how he can use his talent to do something good in the world. And as he's the middle of 3 boys, and the older brother, which is very common, teases and taunts him, as very often older brothers do. But poor Frankie, even his younger brother, who's barely older than a toddler, harasses him. And he tries so hard to be a good person that some of his family members take advantage.
Yeah.
And as a result, he's even more lost at home than he is at school.
Yeah. And he's really trying to figure out, he knows who he is to a certain extent, but he's not comfortable yet with who he is. And there's a very sweet scene in the book when one of his teachers gives him a book for Christmas about Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And she just writes a note that says something about, showing his colors, and he really struggles with that. And I think a lot of people could resonate with that too, right? Because no matter what age we are, we still sometimes hide parts of who we are, and he's really
Yes.
struggling with what he can share with his classmates and his family.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I wanted to say that I actually had a Miss Sullivan when I was in grade school. She was actually my third grade teacher. So, of course, the character of Miss Sullivan in the book, the speech she has to the students the last day before they get out for Christmas holiday is, of course, not something that my third grade teacher would have told us because we're way too young. But I did have a Miss Sullivan, and this is the book
Oh,
that
wow.
she gave us, and I've kept it all these years.
Oh, I
And
love
there's just a
that.
little inscription that just says "Merry Christmas, Roger, Miss Sullivan." And I've never been able to find her again because that's the only name I knew for her. You know,
Sure.
Sullivan's a pretty common name, but I've always wanted to find her and just thank her, because her gift to me made such an indelible impact, because it was such a kind thing to do. And once I became a teacher and realized how little money we made, I thought about the fact that Miss Sullivan bought every one of her students a copy of this book. And, that came right out of her own pocket. And I thought it was
Yeah.
just such a gentle, loving gift to give all of us. And I really appreciated her. So if by chance somehow, Miss Sullivan, you're out there, shout out to you. Thank you for
Yeah.
the impact you made on my life.
Oh, I love that maybe if you can't find her, but you were able to honor her in this way. I love that. Was there an initial inspiration or jumping off point for this particular book?
Yes, 2 Christmases ago, I was putting out the Christmas decorations in our home, and I love as an author, as a former librarian, as a former English teacher, I love books, of course. So I have a collection of Christmas books,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a display where I put them in my living room, where I have just a whole array of different Christmas classics, and then there's a statue that my mom gave me years ago of Santa Claus reading a book, and I have this special tribute. And I was putting it out one year, and I just looked at those books and I thought, I would love to contribute to the body of work that are out there for Christmas. And so, just based on that one inspiration, I just thought my next book is going to be a Christmas book. I'm going to write a Christmas novel. And without any further pre-planning than that, I just sat down right after I finished the book that I was currently working on, and just dove right in, and it came out No Stranger Christmas.
Wonderful. Did you have an idea of how you wanted the story to go? The character of Frankie? I mean, what did you just sit down and kind of brainstorm? How did the whole story come about?
I love to share stories like this, because when I teach my writing classes and when I'm coaching my clients one-on-one, I tell them, just dive right into that first draft. Some people like to outline and, do a lot of research ahead of time and plan and plan. And for some writers, that's fine. That may work for them. But to me, the first draft is all about coming from your subconscious. So the only prep work that I do before I do my first drafts is I spend as much time in meditation as I can, just clearing my conscious mind, just trying to get all the cluttering thoughts out of the way, so that those ideas that are bubbling up deep inside of me have a clear passageway to come to the surface and come out onto the computer. And so the preparation I do is just try to clear out the ideas, try not to have any pre-planned idea. Sometimes I have the ending in mind. That's a very good way to go. It's kind of like, you see the top of the mountain, but you have no idea what path will take you there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll have an end in mind. I knew the message that I wanted to give. And then Frankie just showed up, and I said, okay, Frankie, I'm going to follow you through on your journey. And this is where he took me.
Okay. See, this is fun because when you were here last time, it was a memoir. So, a different process because that's your own story. So we didn't talk about how you create characters and storylines. When I first started reading the book, I was sitting next to my husband and I said, hey babe, guess what year this book takes place? And Frankie's dad was, he lit a Pall Mall and he was drinking a Sanka. My husband was like, yeah, I can figure out what decade that's from. Did you, why did you just decide to set it in the time period as opposed to now or, another time?
I like the idea of historical fiction because it can give young readers a perspective that they might not have of what the world was like and what led to how things are now. And it surprised me to learn when I became a librarian, in one of my library science classes, that historical fiction for young adults is anything before the year they were born, which means that things that seem really recent to me would be historical fiction to some
Yeah.
some younger readers. And so I thought, well, let me move it back in time. And there are details about some of the supporting characters that you may recall, the ones who run the stores in town. Some of that backstory on them and the psychological things that go on and what the parents tried to do. I think that would inform young readers, because I think they would have no idea that that kind of stuff even went on. And
Yeah.
so it gave me an opportunity to delve a little bit into the history and give young readers an idea that things were not always as they are, and that the courage that it takes Frankie to come to terms with himself is part of what enables us now to talk like this about a book for mainstream children.
Yeah. Well, and just the well, first of all, my 14-year-old niece loves to tell me and her mom, my sister, that we were born in the 1900s, and she makes it sound, like we're living on in a little house on the prairie or something. She's always flicker. But I think it's to your point, also interesting for children who grew up with cell phones, with screens, with a lot of different things, to know that childhood looked very different, even in their parents' childhoods. We didn't have a cell phone to call our parents if we were somewhere. We didn't have a different thing. So I think that's an interesting way for them to read about and maybe understand parents, grandparents.
Yes, and adding details like that, like having a little phone table in their kitchen. I love details like that, because I'm sure young readers would think, well, what in the world's a phone table? I've never heard of that. Why would anybody need a phone table?
Yeah.
So I was able to incorporate elements like that, or some of the details, like in the classroom where the teacher is brushing the chalk off of her hands.
Mhm.
The old days when that chalk would get everywhere, and that was true even when I was a teacher, because I started teaching in the mid 1980s. But details like that would be so foreign to us. It's like, well, why would there be chalk in the classroom?
Right.
Why don't you just use the dry board?
Or trying to have privacy on the phone when you were a kid or a teenager, and you're like taking the phone and trying to go around a corner.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was terrified of the rotary phone as a kid, because I never got once when I was about 5, I dialed the wrong number, and the woman on the other end she said something like, well, why don't you just call me back and I won't answer? Like, she was really mean. And so I was terrified of the rotary phone from then on, because
I can appreciate that.
yeah. Okay. I'm still traumatized by that, and it happened forever ago. It was the 0 and the 9, especially 8 and 7, of course, because they were the ones that had to go all the way around. And I just remember dialing the wrong number and asking for my friend, and this lady just was so mad at me for calling her and interrupting her. And I don't remember exactly what she said, but I do remember crying and telling my mom I didn't want to use the phone anymore. But anyway, that is neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and take our second break of this podcast. When we come back, Roger will talk about some of the research that went into writing this book, not only as historical fiction, but just research in general. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Roger Leslie. We're talking about his book, No Stranger Christmas. Before the break, we were talking about things that maybe you're familiar with, maybe not. Depends on when you grew up. chalk dust and phone tables and phone cords and all kinds of good stuff that may or may not exist in this book because of its time period. But let's go ahead and return now to the conversation with Roger. Because it's historical fiction, did you do, just for the story itself, but did you do any particular types of research for the story?
I actually do the research during the revision period. So when I'm writing the first draft, I don't let anything interrupt that flow. As I teach my writing clients, my number one rule for writing is when you in your first draft, don't get it right, get it written. The main reason many people don't finish their first book is because they're so busy trying to edit it while they're writing it. And you use one part of your brain for creating the original draft and another part of your brain to edit it. And so especially those left brain math science people who just want to keep tweaking it and fixing it and revising as they go along, I say that's the way that you stuntify your own creativity. And so my suggestion then was just to keep going straight through. And so when I do the research, it's after the fact. When I for example, there's a reference to the miracle worker, and I knew I wanted to have one of Frankie's antagonists get the part of the narrator, because as I remembered when I taught the novel years ago, there's a whole long section where the narrator is the only reader for a day or two in the classroom. And so that's the kind of stuff where it's just like, I'll just write it in the first draft. And then I went back and found a copy of the book and made sure I had the correct number of pages it was, and made sure there wasn't anybody with dialogue in the sections. So the research I do is after the fact. The coin shop, I don't know a whole lot about coins. I'm not a coin collector. So things about the coin shop, I didn't know about that. And silver pennies during World War II. Those are the kinds of things that I had an idea of what they were, but I didn't know how to make it accurate until I did the research to make sure I had all the details right.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about that. I had to look them up because I wasn't fully, I wasn't sure I knew what you were talking about. So I made sure that I looked them up. I would imagine maybe some stuff on Frankie's a big presidential history fan. Is that an interest of yours, or did you have to look a lot of that up as well for Frankie?
I did have to look up some of it, but I will admit I was a huge president nerd when I was a kid. I loved studying the presidents. I loved memorizing who they were, what years they were in office, what their wives' names were, and I wasn't politically motivated. I really didn't focus so much on their platforms, but I was fascinated by their personal histories. And so some things that I did research that really came to light, the record album that the owner of the coin shop plays when Frankie walks in, I did not even know that existed. I was doing the research and I came upon that. And so all the details in there are from an actual Burl Ives narrated album that came out in I think it came out in the 1960s. So that was a great discovery. I don't have the album. I just found the information online about the album. But to discover what Abraham Lincoln's favorite Christmas carol was, or Thomas Jefferson's favorite Christmas carol, I had no idea. So I learned a lot by doing the research for that. And that was just something that by accident I stumbled upon, and it was really fun to discover.
Yeah. You and I could have been nerdy history buff friends in school, because my senior year paper, I wrote about the first ladies. So you could have known the presidential facts, and I could have chimed in with the first lady facts, and everybody would have rolled their eyes at us.
That was a common occurrence for me. I was the kind of kid who could talk ad nauseum about certain things I liked to every one of my teachers. And of course they were very sweet and indulged me, but when I became a teacher and I had students who did that with me, I really had a clear idea of, it's just like, oh my goodness, you poor thing, get a life, honey.
Yeah. Bless your heart. You talk about writing your first draft and just, get it written, not get it right. But there's a lot of symbolism in the novel, including themes about money, which we've talked a little bit about the coins, but also characters' names.
Yes.
So did you kind of tweak names after the fact, or was that something you were conscious of during that first draft?
that's part of the revision process for me too. What I like is to start with a really strong plot, have a good story with a central conflict that draws the reader forward, makes them want to turn the pages, head to a big climactic scene where there's a huge confrontation of some kind, and then let there be a resolution. And then from there, add layer upon layer upon layer of different meanings, because I was always the kind of student who I liked to analyze literature. So I loved my English classes. And of course, I became an English teacher myself. So I like when novels work on both levels, where someone can just read a story and it can work fine. Just, if you don't know anything deeper than that, that's fine. But to me, it's more fun to go to those deeper levels and think, what is the author trying to say here? And how do they do that? And a lot of that is done through symbolism. So I did that with the name symbolism and the symbolism of money and fire. So all those recurring motifs that I use throughout the book. If I were an English teacher teaching this class, I would just say, okay, I can have a field day with this because there's so much to it. But if I just want to read, just a sweet Christmas story, it can work at that level as well.
Mm-hmm. Some of the names are like, there's a character named Mary Carol. I mean, that's pretty Christmassy. Then there's some other, for instance, I didn't even think about it, but you've got a reader's guide at the back, and it said there's a nod to the nativity with the three sons' names. And I had to think about it because I went three kings. I was like, no, their initials aren't the names of the kings, but gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Yes.
There you go.
Okay.
Because they're Gordy, Frankie, and Mason.
And I was like, Melchior, Balthazar. Melchior, there's the M, but I was like, Balthazar. No, there's not a B.
Well, and I went with those names too. I considered those, but then I thought, young readers wouldn't really catch that. But, when you start with G-O for Gordy, and that's gold, and then Frankie for frankincense, it's just like, you don't have to dig too deep to realize, oh, wow, there's a parallel here. That's kind of interesting. I hope.
Did you go to Catholic school?
Up through 9th grade, yes.
Okay,
so some of that, some of the details that I was able to use were modeled after the school that I went to. I changed the name of it for symbolic reasons, but yes, some of the grounds and what the sanctuary looked like came directly from some of my childhood memories.
And did your 8th grade class do a live nativity, or was that?
No, but when I got to high school, I no longer went to a Catholic school, but I belonged to a Catholic group at our church, and I think it was my sophomore year we did a live nativity, and that was just we just paraded toward the center area, and there was a Mary and a Joseph who knelt down by the baby Jesus, and I was a shepherd, so we just kind of stood around, and that was the extent of it. So that may have played into how the idea came to me in the first place.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I thought I remembered from talking to you before that there was Catholic school involved, but it's very central to Frankie's story. And I never did a live nativity growing up, but we did nativity plays at church every year, and I always wanted to be Mary, of course. I was a shepherd. I was one of the wise men. I always wanted to be Mary, and they always had older kids do the parts of Mary and Joseph. And so the year that I was convinced, I don't know, maybe 5th grade, I was convinced that I was going to get to be Mary that year. They decided that they were going to switch it up and have like a preschooler or kindergartner or first grader to do those roles. And I was so disappointed. Rotary phones and nativity plays, the things that I need therapy from my childhood. We're going to go ahead and take another break for this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about some of those conversations that Frankie has with the adults in his life that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. You are tuned into the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Roger Leslie. Before the break, Roger was talking about the live nativity that is a large part of the plot in this book, being that Frankie decides to write the script for it. Let's go ahead and return now to that conversation with Roger. I couldn't remember. I thought I remembered from talking to you before that there was Catholic school involved, but it's very central to Frankie's story in terms of he's really trying to figure out himself, but he's as part of that, I mean, his faith and how he understands the world. And so I really appreciated not only a conversation that he has with his dad, but some of the conversations that he has with some teachers, and then the woman Mary who's helping with the nativity. So talk a little bit about placing those adults into Frankie's life to help him on that path.
Well, with any literary tradition, there are always certain stock characters that show up. And one of the main rules of writing children's or young adult literature is that the central character has to figure everything out for him or herself. That, you just can't have an adult come in and say, well, why don't you just do this? And they do that and it works.
Right.
And so that's
why
what
14-year-old's going to actually do.
Exactly. So, if I may, I'd like to read a passage from the novel, if it's okay. It's a very short one, but
Yep.
This is a scene where Frankie is having dinner with Mary Carroll after one of the rehearsals for the live nativity, and he's feeling very discouraged and very disheartened. And Mary says to him, "Follow your art." And he says, "But my heart only hurts." "Not your heart, sweetie, your art. You are an artist. You must follow where it's taking you. Its path is the way of your soul. You talk too deep. I'm smart. I can understand most anything. But when you talk so abstractly, it sounds like you're being Frankie's brain searched for the vocabulary word that fit here. Obtuse. Frankie, I'm learning myself as I talk to you. I'm working through my own journey. I thought you were on your mountaintop. Oh, sweetie, we don't get just one mountain in this lifetime. Every time we conquer one, we're in full view of the next one. Oh, sounds exhausting. Oh, to me, it's exhilarating. You're exhausted from carrying what you should let go of. What's that? That, she pointed emphatically, you have to figure out for yourself. See, you're doing it again. You're talking circles around the subject instead of just saying what I need to hear. What do you need to hear, Frankie? That I'm going to be all right, that God loves me no matter what. You want directness? Yes, he was adamant, and then exhausted. Please. You won't be all right until you decide to be all right. God can't do that for you. It's your job. For God to love me? God is love, so God can't and won't do anything else. It's you that needs to love you. How? Frankie racked his brain to figure it out on his own. When? You figure out how. You decide when.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about the book is that there's, as he's trying to figure things out, there's all these great theological conversations that I sure as heck didn't have growing up. I mean, I didn't ever have a religious leader or anyone talk to me that it's directly, but it's not, because Frankie is saying, you're talking in circles, but she's also trying to tell him that, a lot of this comes from him. He has to figure a lot of it out.
Yes.
So I really appreciated that aspect of the book. And again, I assume that came out as you were writing. Did you want to make it more about theology, or did that come from just the way the story went?
Most everything I write is about spirituality, not necessarily religion and not necessarily theology, but more about who are we as spiritual beings? What is it beyond the surface of this physical world that makes life magical? And so that's always the central theme that I'm exploring in most of my books. And so, yes, it was integral to this book as well. And I think it's a good good topic for young people to explore, because there is so much more than just the physical world. And whether people are religious or not religious at all, whether they have, whether they belong to some organized religion or they have no connection to it at all, to me, that's irrelevant. If it has, if a religion has meaning to somebody, that's wonderful. More power to them.
Yeah.
But the bigger picture, I think, is who are we beyond the surface, and what is it that's part of our eternal journey that makes life worth living?
Yeah. We talked a little bit about symbolism. Is there one symbol in particular that you want to talk about as part of the story, or?
The symbolism of fire, I think, works well in this story. One issue I had with it was the fact that the mom and the dad both smoke, and I just think, is that really, do I really want to depict characters who smoke for young readers? And then in the course of the story, as you know, because you've read the novel, 2 significant fires occur that make an impact on Frankie, and how he changes his perception of his ability to do things on his own, and precisely how his mother responds to his act of heroism. They just felt like, wow, okay. So that's when I added other nuances, like, I left in the cigarettes and kind of, and I spaced out those scenes so that they formed a pattern. And then there's also a scene, as you may recall, where Dad and Gordy are working on the furnace, and they're trying to get the furnace working again. So those symbols of fire related to passion, and which of course relates back to art, which is all that Mary Carroll ever talks about. It's like, everything is about your art. Everything, who you are is what you create, and what you create is the gift you give to the world. So the symbolism of the fire worked really well, I thought, for me, as I was piecing together the symbolic elements of the novel.
Yeah. Although it's less about symbolism and more about, sometimes parents, they're so helpful, because Frankie's all proud of himself because he puts out a fire that's potentially happening in their kitchen, and she's like, we have a fire extinguisher. You did what, it's less about, gee, thanks, Mom, for praising me for doing something good.
Well, and to me, that's a very pivotal scene, because I think a lot of Frankie's lack of awareness and self-confidence comes from the feedback that he gets from his mother.
Yeah.
Which is why, and I don't want to say anything more than this, but that's why the ending, that last gesture, is so meaningful.
Yes.
To Frankie, and I hope to readers, because it is an effort to show movement.
Yes. Yep. And again, I keep wanting to follow up, and then I keep stopping myself. So I'm just saying yes, because we don't want to give away the ending, right?
Exactly.
Are you working on anything new currently?
Always, always, always. So my next book that comes out is already done. It's in pre-production right now. It's called Being Mr. Leslie, and it is a tribute to the students that I taught back when I was a high school English teacher in the 80s and 90s. And it is all about the lessons I learned from them as a teacher and as a human being. So that'll come out in May. And in the meantime, I'm writing another movie reference book. I love movies, and I love writing reference books about movies, as well as a 4-novel series that traces 5 sisters through 4 different decades throughout the 20th century. And I've been working on that series. Actually, I look back in my notes. I started the first draft of the first book back in 2010. So I've been working on this one for a long time. I'm revising the second one, and in the series, I have the first draft of all 4 books written. So it'll be a little while till I get all the pieces together, because it's a huge endeavor, but I'm excited. This is my biggest challenge as an author, to do justice to these 5 sisters in these novels.
Wow. I can only imagine how many details and moving parts there are to keep track of in a series such as Roger was just talking about that he is working on. That's Amazing. I mean, it sounds great. I look forward to learning more about it and the women that he is depicting. But we are going to go ahead and take our final break of this episode. When we come back, a question that I don't normally ask, but what is Roger's favorite movie? There is a point to that. I mean, it is in context. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with Roger Leslie. Before the break, Roger was talking about his current works in progress, which is works is accurate. It is a series. So let's go ahead and finish up the conversation with Roger. Is asking you your favorite movie like asking you, like a favorite child or something? Is that...
Actually, as I'm known as a movie expert. I do a lot of keynote speeches where I tie in movie awards with any topic. And so I usually qualify this by saying, remember, I was 11 years old when I saw this movie, but the movie, The Poseidon Adventure, the 1972 disaster movie, I saw that when I was 11, and I knew the minute I saw it that was going to be my favorite movie forever and ever and ever. So that's it. I love The Poseidon Adventure. I can never get enough of it.
Nothing has dethroned it?
Oh, nothing. Never.
That's impressive. A lot of 11-year-olds do not have that level of confidence to say, this is it.
Well, one trait that's true of me is I'm loyal. And when I decide I love something or someone, I just stick with it. It's just like, no, this is what I love and this is it. And for me, the movie is The Poseidon Adventure.
I've never seen it, so I will have to.
Well, don't feel bad. We went out to dinner with a new friend last night. We met her at my brother's birthday party last week, and so we invited her to dinner, and we talked about movies, and I mentioned it, and she never even heard of it. So at least you've heard of it.
I've heard of it, yes. It was a little before my time, so
Sure.
11 is a pivotal age. I get that. I grew up a little bit later, so it was more like original Star Wars, those sorts of things that were.
Yeah, that was our son. Our son Corey, huge Star Wars fan, has always been. He raced through the living room as a kid. We'd be wrapping presents and everything, and he'd take the tube from the wrapping paper, and that was his laser beam going around the living room,
Yep.
fighting off all the aliens.
I used to get so mad because my brother would always make me be Princess Leia, and I liked Princess Leia, but just because I was a girl, I did not want to always have to be. I wanted to be Han Solo, and he would never let me be Han Solo.
I understand.
Anyway, we talked about what you've been writing. What have you been reading when you read just for you?
So I like to read inspirational books, and so I've been reading some Robin Sharma, and some of I usually take fiction along with me when I go on vacation. So I usually, just take recommendations from friends. But lately, because I've been feeling overwhelmed lately, I've had some friends recommend books about like quieting the mind and taking time to just let my soul be at peace and rest. as a very proactive person, I feel like I always want to be doing something that makes some meaningful contribution to the world. And for the most part, that's a good thing. But sometimes I get into overdrive. And so lately, thanks to the friends who recommended these books, actually, they sent them to me for free. It's just like, you need to read this book. So I've been reading books about calm, about peace, about slowing down and just letting things happen at their own natural pace. And they've both been very helpful.
I think the last time you were here, we might have talked about mindfulness a little bit, if I'm
Yes.
remembering correctly.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Do you have one really quick piece of advice for somebody who just, like, if you could just give one tidbit for quieting the mind?
More than anything else, just be still.
Mm,
Just be still.
yeah. All right. Thank you. If people want to learn more about you and your books, website, and any social media that you're active on.
So my website is just my name. It's www.rogerleslie.com. And so everything's there, everything about my writing, my editing, my coaching, my publishing, because I publish other people's books as well. So that's all there. And I'm on Instagram and on Facebook. Those are the two main social media outlets that I use. But yeah, people can find me at any of those places. And when you go to my website, if you want to subscribe to my email, I write inspiring emails once a month. I don't want to overwhelm people. So my tradition is to once at the beginning of every month, I send out an inspiring email to help you through your new month.
All right. Thank you. And Roger, is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to make sure that we talked about, especially in terms of No Stranger Christmas?
No, I'll just share that I'm very proud of the book. I think it's just with the work that was put into it, the designer and everything. I'm very pleased. It's already won some awards. We brought the book out in June for Pride Month, so we're just doing a resurgence of a promotion for Christmas. But I would encourage anyone who's looking for something inspiring and joyful and meaningful and rich, that this might be a good book for them, whether they're a young adult or an adult. It might be something that they would like to experience this Christmas season.
Yeah. And we didn't talk about the cover, but it's beautiful. Did you have any say in that, or did it just work out that that's the...
Actually, my first vision was to have the candelabra. Do you remember the candelabra that Frankie loves so much in the window? Yep. I'd envisioned that with a frosted window pane behind it. And so we worked, I worked with the cover designer with that idea, and it just didn't come out. And she said, well, let me try this. And then we worked on that. And when she added the colors with the pink and everything, was really unique. Instead of just the traditional green and red and everything, or gold, the way she added those elements that kind of allude to the LGBTQ theme without being too forthright in it. I just ended up loving it. I just think it has that feel of just a very beautiful silent night. And I'm very pleased with the work that she did on that.
Yeah, well, and it's perfect now because my Facebook feed for the last month has been filled with everybody seeing the Northern Lights. I'm having total FOMO because I'm here, I'm in Europe, and the Northern Lights have been amazing in the US this year. So it actually works on that level as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming back and taking the time to talk to me about the novel and writing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. I had a great experience. You're a wonderful interviewer. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm so much better at saying thank you for people being here than I am at accepting compliments. It really was just saying thank you, but holy awkwardness, Batman. At any rate, thank you again to Roger for joining me for a second time, this time to talk about No Stranger Christmas. Christmas is coming, even though we are only in the first week of November, but you are maybe already thinking about, if not Christmas, there's other holiday gift giving coming up in the next 2 months. Lots and lots of holidays, but maybe you're thinking about books and people that you would like to give books to. This is, as I said, such a sweet and kind story, and so many really lovely conversations that take place throughout. Frankie is 14, and I think that age group would be great with this, but older as well, young adults, even adults, this would enjoy this book. So if you know someone in your life that you are thinking about gifting a book, then you might want to look into this. Or if you yourself are looking for a Christmas story that you would like to read this year, or maybe even add to your Christmas reading rotation, then you should definitely look into this book. And of course, Roger has written 22 books. So if you read this one and like it, or maybe you've read some of his others and like it, you have plenty to choose from in terms of maybe you just found a new author, which is always, always exciting. So thank you to Roger again for joining me. Thank you, of course, to you for joining me for this episode. I do hope that you will join me for the next episode. Next week, I will be having 2 episodes, 2 interviews. Looking forward to that. The first of those interviews is with Ellen Burkett Morris. Her book, Beware the Tall Grass, is also historical fiction, but it is a dual timeline. So it's more contemporary and then taking place in the 60s. It's not quite current because it's a little further back than current, but you've got 2 timelines, and the 1960s timeline it takes place between Missoula, Montana. I should specify, not everyone knows where Missoula is, and Vietnam. I happen to know where Missoula is because that's where I went to college, and it's only 75 miles from my hometown. So when I picked up the book and saw that Missoula was one of the places, I was very excited. So that's the timeline in Missoula and Vietnam, and then the more current timeline, there's a really interesting tie-in between those 2 timelines that I don't want to tell you yet, but hopefully you will join me for this conversation with Ellen as we discuss Beware the Tall Grass. As always, if you are a fan of this podcast and have not done so already, please do like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform, again, you are either listening to or watching the podcast on. That really does help the algorithm, gets the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. And leaving a positive review really, really helps that algorithm. So please leave a positive review if you are so inclined. It's greatly appreciated. If you are on social media and would like to follow the podcast on social media, you can do so on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Always say it, but always mean it. Love hearing from you. So find the podcast on social media. Let me know what you're reading. Answer all my nosy questions. Ask me nosy questions. I'm happy to hear from you. Hope you're having a great week so far, this first week of November. Whatever comes your way this week, though, as always, I do hope that you have plenty of time to get yourself lost in a great book, or as many great books as you can stand up to. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to